There are two kinds of news in this world. One you see in public. The other, I hope you never meet in person.
If the alarm clears by itself, don't reset it. Under that, when C7 hit and cleared and I manually reset it, the corridor advanced. It is not. Archive file C7-17, Vandemark Fulfillment, South Building. The note attached to this report was not typed into the system and did not appear in any training document. It was written by hand in blue ink at the top of a paper overnight log sheet and underlined once. It says, "If the alarm clears by itself, don't reset it." Under that, smaller, C7 only. The statement below was copied from the overnight security notebook of Eli Torres, Contract Watch, late summer rotation. Most bad advice at work announces itself right away. It sounds lazy, or bitter, or proud of being wrong. It sounds like somebody teaching you how to cut a corner so the next problem becomes your problem instead of theirs. The note about C7 did not sound like that. It sounded specific. That was worse. Vandemark was the kind of warehouse that looked simple from outside and stupidly complicated once you had keys. One long concrete shell, loading bays on the south face, offices boxed across the front. Racking behind it all in neat industrial rows with lane letters and overhead markers big enough to read from a forklift seat. At night, the whole place turned into a map of what still mattered. Active dock, trailer yard gate, server closet outside dispatch, returns cage, the one freezer annex where the alarm panel threw fits every time warm air hit it too fast. C7 sat at the back end of the restricted returns corridor. Not high drama, no giant vault door, just chain link partition, keyed latch, and a caged section where flagged electronics and damaged freight waited for inspection. It was the sort of area that almost never needed a body after midnight, which was exactly why you watched it. A place with no reason for traffic gets loud fast when the wrong thing touches it. The returns cage had its own kind of quiet, not clean quiet, warehouse quiet. Cardboard softened by humidity. Plastic wrap caught on the bottom of fence posts. The sour battery smell that never fully left the tool room. A narrow camera angle that gave you the latch, the first 6 feet of cage, and just enough corridor to know when something had entered the frame too late. During days, nobody thought of it as strange. There were clipboards, pallet jacks, receivers arguing about damaged cartons. Somebody from inventory walking over with a tablet and a face that said this was not their department. At night, when the cage was supposed to be only locked evidence and dead freight, the same space stopped feeling like storage and started feeling like a place waiting for a task to resume. On overnights, I had one floor walker until 1 and nobody after. That meant triage. Main gate cameras first. South dock if a late trailer was expected. Internal alarms if they stayed live longer than a blink. You do not go chasing every panel chirp in a building that size by yourself. You sort the difference between nuisance and momentum. That was why the note bothered me. If an access or motion alarm clears on its own, normal practice is simple. Acknowledge. Verify camera if you have it. Reset if the zone returns normal. Keep the board clean. Nobody likes a dirty panel at handoff. The handwriting on the note wasn't mine. It belonged to Jana Beck, the woman who had covered my shift before me for about 6 months. I never met her. By the time I started, she had already moved off contract or quit or been pushed, depending on who you asked. Her name still sat on the inside cover of the paper log, crossed out once in black marker and replaced by mine. At 2:14, my second week on site, C7 alarmed. One sharp tone. Zone amber. Motion. Returns cage south. I pulled the corridor camera. Nothing. No body at the latch. No cart. No reflected movement past the cage mesh. Just the gray strip of polished concrete. One half-loaded pallet against the far fence, and the cleaner shine from the ride scrubber where the floor crew had passed earlier. Before I could even leave the desk, the zone cleared itself. Back to normal. I looked at Jana's note. Then I did the obvious thing and reset it. 10 minutes later, at 2:26, the camera on the same corridor showed a rolling safety ladder sitting crooked across the lane outside C7. That ladder had been hooked in the tool recess by receiving when I did my first interior round. I remembered because one wheel always squealed, and because I had moved the base in with my boot so nobody clipped it on a pallet jack. Now it was in the corridor, turned slightly toward the cage door, like someone had rolled it there and let go. I walked it. No one in the corridor. C7 latch still shut. Seal strip on the inner evidence cabinet unbroken. No entry event on the access report. No reason for the ladder to be there, except a person, and no person attached to it. I checked the wrong explanations first, because that is what keeps you useful. Maybe receiving had left it halfway out and I remembered wrong. Maybe the floor scrubber had clipped it and pushed it into the lane. Maybe somebody had come through on a forgotten badge and the access report was lagging. I walked the recess, the tool room door, the camera blind spot beside the fire riser. I put my light low across the concrete and looked for wheel tracks. There were tracks, but only the old kind, the dull arcs every ladder leaves when it has lived in the same bad corner for too long. Nothing fresh enough to say, "This wheel rolled 10 minutes ago." Nothing that gave me a clean sentence to write. I put it back, wrote, "Possible unauthorized movement. No actor found," and decided the note was either coincidence or warehouse folk religion. The next night, C7 alarmed at 2:09. Again, the zone cleared itself before I stood up. This time, I left it alone. I did not reset the panel. The amber stayed on the board all the way to 3, ugly as a bruise. Nothing happened after. No moved ladder, no open latch, no loose shrink wrap dragging in the aisle. That should have made me feel stupid. Instead, it made the note heavier. So I started testing it the only way a tired night worker can test anything, by surviving the same hour several times and watching what repeated. When C7 hit and cleared and I left it yellow, the rest of the building stayed ordinary. When C7 hit and cleared and I manually reset it, the corridor advanced. Not dramatically, not in one big haunted house performance, in little operational insults. A pallet strap that had not been hanging loose started dragging from under the chain link. A scanner cradle in the tool room pinged a login sound, even though the device assigned to it was dead and cabled on charge. A roll-up marker gate 3 zones north reported open for 3 seconds, then shut before any camera caught movement. Once, after a reset, I found the foam corner protectors from a damaged television stacked in a neat pair outside the cage, as if someone had begun a returns task and then remembered they no longer had hands. The order mattered more than the objects. If it had been random, I could have blamed power, or a bad access module, or somebody on day shift lying to me because they did not want to do paperwork. But the later things always felt like work steps. A zone called. A board went clean. Then something in the building seemed to accept that permission and move to the next small action. It never gave me enough to prove anything on a report. That was the worst part. You cannot write "the building attempted to resume an old workflow." You write "strap displaced," "scanner audible without user," "marker gate momentary fault." You learn how much of fear at work is just bad evidence arriving in company language. Every time, the first panel event was the same. Every time, the later movement only came if I tried to clean the board. I pulled the old log sheets after that. Paper matters at night because software only stores what the drop-down menu respects. The paper log gets the rest. Which lane smelled hot? Which dock plate stuck in fog? Which forklift battery kept dying on the same charger even after Dayside swore it was fixed? And, if you were lucky, one line from the last person who got far enough into the weird part to leave you a fence post. Jana had left more than one. C7 hit 158, cleared itself, left it, no follow-through. Reset once to test. Bad idea. It is not false. It is early. Then, farther back, if the board wants to carry C7 yellow till handoff, let it. And after that, half a sentence cut off at the bottom of a page. It keeps trying to finish the old outbound route, but only when somebody makes it start over. There was no next page. I checked the binder rings twice, then the drawer, then the trash archive box under the desk. Nothing. Either the page was lost, or someone had decided the part after that was not for me. I asked Marcy, one of the day supervisors, what C7 had been before it was returns holding. Overflow access to outbound 12 years ago, she said. Before my time. They closed that lane after the mezzanine remodel. Closed how? Walled the far connection, shifted the route. Why? I told her I was just learning the map. That was true enough. The farther end of C7 used to feed into an outbound lane that no longer existed as a lane. The racks stayed, but the through route had been cut, one side decked over, and another section boxed by wire and drywall after a conveyor accident years back. Not a famous accident, not the sort that gets a plaque, just the kind logistics people refer to as before they changed the flow. That night I walked the old end and found the patched wall where the lane used to continue. Paint over old anchor marks, new conduit. One place low on the drywall where the forklift bumper strip had been scuffed too often before the closure, and the repaint had never fully hidden it. I stood there longer than I needed to, because the shape of Jana's note finally made sense. It wasn't that the alarm was false. It was that the alarm belonged to a route the building no longer officially admitted. That thought did not arrive like a revelation. It arrived like a maintenance answer, which somehow made it colder. A bad sensor does not care what the floor plan says this year. A routed habit does not care that a wall went up after a remodel. Systems keep old assumptions longer than people admit. They carry them in labels, in patched wires, in the names nobody bothers to change because the new layout mostly works. I stood with my light on the wall and imagined the lane before it was closed. Cart from cage, scan at tool room, gate north, outbound end. A sequence ordinary enough that nobody would have remembered it if it had stayed ordinary. Then an accident, a remodel, a revised flowchart, a wall. The building losing the path on paper, but not, apparently, everywhere else. The panel saw the first part early. If you reset it, you told the system to begin again. I might have left it there if management had let me. They didn't. About 3 weeks later, Regional Security did one of their remote compliance sweeps. Those people never call when the work is interesting. They call when they want a screenshot of a clean board. At 2:03, my desk line rang. "You still have a stale amber on C7?" the regional guy asked. "It's self-cleared," I told him. "Then reset it." I looked at the note in Jana's hand. I should have lied. Instead, I said, "We've been watching a pattern with that zone." He gave me the exact laugh people use when they are one management layer above the physical place that can hurt you. "Reset the panel, Torres. I need the report clean." So I did. At 2:11, the scanner cradle in tool room south chirped. At 2:13, the camera at old outbound patch wall caught the cage shadows shift. Not because anything crossed them, but because the aisle lights, one zone at a time, came on deeper into the building in a sequence that no current route used. C7, C8, D1, then the old end. I grabbed my radio, got only static, and went off desk. The corridor was empty when I hit it. No intruder, no employee, no forklift. But the building was doing work. That is the only way I can phrase it without dressing it up. The lane lights ahead of me were waking in order, one cluster at a time, as if a picker route was advancing through a path the floor map no longer had permission to display. The chain link on C7 trembled once, lightly, like something had brushed it with a sleeve. From the far patched wall came the dull impact of plastic wheels crossing a seam in concrete. I ran to the old end just in time to hear one more sound, a shrink-wrap roll being set down upright. The patched wall stood in front of me, painted, solid, closed. Nothing on either side of it except a scuff of fresh dust at the floor line and a single square of barcode label paper stuck to the base, curled at one edge like it had only just been peeled from a carton. No one there. No way through. No reason for the route to have finished, except that I had reset the first warning and told the system, or whatever was nested inside the system, that it could begin the sequence again from the top. I did not reset C7 after that. I let it sit yellow every time it cleared itself. Morning supervisors complained twice and then stopped because the later anomalies stopped with it. And because night operations are full of compromises nobody likes enough to formalize. I never found Jana's missing page. Maybe it was lost. Maybe somebody tore it because half-finished truth makes people itch worse than no truth at all. I did keep her sentence. When the old top sheet finally smudged into unreadable blue, I copied it in my own hand on a fresh page and left the line exactly the same. If the alarm clears by itself, don't reset it. Then I added one more. It isn't false. It's early. That was as much handoff as I could manage. Warehouses do not remember people well. They remember throughput. They remember lane numbers. They remember where steel had to be replaced and which flowchart got redrawn after somebody bled on the wrong concrete. If a person lasts in the building at all, it is usually in the form of one ugly instruction that keeps the next person from stepping on the same edge. C7 still goes yellow on some nights before dawn. If it clears itself, I leave it alone. The board stays dirty until handoff. That used to bother me. Now it feels like the cleanest thing I do all shift.